What's going on, YouTube? Bacon here, bringing you another video. This one gonna be my week 6 battle for the season 1 of the ABC. This week we're going up against my friend Jeff. We played Jeff earlier in the season, or earlier in BPL, and now we're playing him in the ABC as well. We know Jeff's a good battler, so it's obviously going to be a difficult match for us. He's got a pretty decent matchup on paper. He's got things like Araquanid with sticky webs to help out his breakers and stuff like that. Currently we're sitting at 5-0, guaranteed a playoff spot with a win this week. And Jeff, I believe, is sitting at 4-1. His only loss coming to, I believe, Lord Z and the Philadelphia Phantoms earlier in the season. So both of us kind of contending for that first round bye here, actually, for the most part. So winner of this obviously would have tiebreaker over the other one in terms of head-to-head matchup if differential ends up tied at the end of the season or something. So still a big game here late in the season, even though we're undefeated to this point. Definitely want to pick up a win here and guarantee ourselves a spot in playoffs and potentially get close to securing a first round bye. Just going really quickly through the teams here, what Jeff has available to him, what I've got this week. Jeff has available the Tapu Koko, Medicham, Medicham, Skarmory, Hydreigon, Mamoswine, Blissey, Araquanid, Salazzle, Roserade, Ditto, Minior, Claydol, and Phytinium Z Crystal. Oh no, excuse me, it's not Phytinium Z Crystal, it's a Poisonium Z Crystal. I had that written down wrong. Yeah, Poisonium Z Crystal for Jeff, mostly to pair with the Salazzle. You can actually run things like Z Belch Hydreigon to hit like my Comfey, for example, if you wanted to be that crazy about it, but Comfey does kind of out-prioritize it with Draining Kiss and stuff, so you'd have to make a prediction on the switch. Poisonium Z actually also being good for the Roserade, potentially, so it pairs pretty nicely with his team. But I'm not necessarily expecting to see it this week, unless he brings the Salazzle, which you can see he didn't. So just gonna really quickly go through what I brought here to kind of counter Jeff's build this week. Got a very bulky build this week. Prior to the game, I didn't really realize how bulky, like in terms of kind of a lack of offensive pressure. But I'll just go through it really quickly here. We got Chimpact the Infernape coming back, bringing back Choice Scarf Infernape for this week, just to naturally outspeed the Koko, assuming he's not Choice Scarf. And then even under webs, I would still be able to outspeed specifically like the Medicham and the Mamoswine, which could be potentially big threats for my team if he has webs up. Like I mentioned again, he didn't bring the Araquanid either, but definitely needed to be prepared for the event of having to play the game with webs. And Infernape's really the only mon on my team that didn't appreciate them too much in this case. Earthquake Close Combat, Flare Blitz, and U-Turn. The Dual Stab can break through his Skarm Bliss core, and then Earthquake just being nice to hit things like the Tapu Koko. Even though Flare Blitz does almost as much damage, if I'm in Blaze range, it actually does more, but I'd rather not take the recoil to hit the Tapu Koko in that instance. And Earthquake also hits the Salazzle for 4 times super effective damage, which would normally resist my Dual Stab. U-Turn just for momentum. I can really pivot around his team quite nicely with Infernape here, especially if I get in on things like the Skarm that don't want to stay in on me. I can just U-Turn out, predicting a switch. Really good matchup for Infernape this week, I think. Next up, we've got Dedicated Sakamon Scizor coming back here. This is an Iron Plate SD set with Bullet Punch, U-Turn, and Knockoff. Close to max HP, max attack Adamant, a little bit in speed. Can't really remember what I was creeping in this instance, but it was something important. But I ran SD this week, and like, he's got a Skarmory. Why would you bring SD Scizor? Well, Skarmory's got a lot of pressure on it this match, I think, and if I can whittle it down just enough to the point where it's in range of Scizor, like I go +2 on the switch or whatever, he pretty much has to bring in Skarmory. He doesn't have a whole lot of better responses. I can get this thing set up on a lot of mons on his team, and if I get to +2 and Skarmory's gone, +2 Bullet Punch has a really good chance to clean his team late game. And I've got U-Turn and Knockoff to just kind of pivot around in the middle of the game. Knockoff can potentially remove the leftovers or a Rocky Helmet on Skarmory earlier in the match. So that was kind of the idea behind the Scizor. I didn't necessarily need to get an SD up to do well in this match. Like, Bullet Punch was still good for checking things like the Mamoswine, a potential Minior, or something like the Medicham if it's chipped a little bit. So Bullet Punch still being pretty valuable in the matchup in itself. But SD giving me the potential to sweep late game if the Skarmory's gone, or if it's at a low enough range of health that I can kill it with a Knockoff at +2. So that was kind of the idea behind Scizor this week. I think it still has a pretty good matchup despite the presence of the Skarmory. So we'll see how it does in the match. Next up, we got a really important member of the team here, Rotom Wash coming back with Leftovers, Hydro Pump, Volt Switch, Defog, and Toxic. Toxic over Will-O-Wisp in this instance, so I could Toxic the Araquanid. Didn't really want to risk any kind of like potential Volt Switch into Mirror Coat type shenanigans where he just kills a mon on my team. Running a lot of speed, max HP, and a little bit in Fizz Def. Great check to the Mamoswine. It really can't touch me too much. Can knock off my Leftovers, but whatever. Hydro Pump being pretty threatening for the Mamoswine in particular. It seems like the Salazzle don't appreciate me being in existence. I can come in on Skarmory and Defog pretty free. I can come in on Araquanid and Defog pretty free, especially if those things aren't carrying Toxic. So Rotom really important in this match to keep Sticky Web in particular, and then maybe Stealth Rock or Spikes off the field on my side. Really nice bulky pivot here with Rotom Wash, very similar to sets I've run earlier in the season. Just kind of pivoting around and getting into the appropriate responses on my team. Obviously, I'm walled by things like Roserade, but if I Volt Switch out predicting the Roserade, I can get in something like my Infernape and click Flare Blitz or U-Turn and kind of keep him in the Volt Turn cycle. As you can see, the first 3 mons on my team already have Volt Switch or U-Turn on them, so the idea is kind of just to make predictions and get into the appropriate responses and keep chipping down his team that way until I can kind of late game clean with something like Infernape or Scizor. Next up, we got Max Spadef Gliscor, Nightshade here coming through, Toxic Orb, Poison Heal with Stealth Rock, Roost, Knockoff, and Earthquake. This is my main Tapu Koko response. If I have my Toxic Orb activated, I can come in on, maybe not Choice, I can't remember if I can eat 2 Choice Specs HP Ices from Tapu Koko. I don't think I can. But if he's just like 252 with no boosting item, you can come in on HP Ice and avoid the 2-hit KO after Poison Heal recovery. And of course I can no-code the thing with Earthquake. Stealth Rock's being really nice in this matchup to pressure things with the Salazzle, the Araquanid, so they can't switch in repeatedly on me. And just in general, nice for chipping down his team, get it in range of something like Scizor and Infernape late game. Knockoff to remove whatever item the Skarmory is carrying. Obviously I'm still kind of walled by Skarmory, and I kind of wall him, wall each other. But Knockoff being nice to at least remove whatever item he's carrying, and if it's Rocky Helmet, that's really nice for me to avoid taking a bunch of chip on my Scizor and my Infernape throughout the course of the match. And Knockoff also kind of just having nice utility in removing items from the rest of his team as well. Next up, we got Winston the Reuniclus with Regenerator, Rocky Helmet this week, Max Fizz Def with Psyshock, Recover, Knockoff, and Thunder Wave. This is my main Mega Medicham response. Mega Medicham really can't touch Reuniclus. I believe actually High Jump Kick does the most damage to it out of all the options that it could go for, and it still does 2-hit KO me on the switch in even when Stealth Rock's up. And obviously the Rocky Helmet chip being really nice to get it in range of something like my Infernape later in the game, or a potential Bullet Punch from my Scizor. And I can also pivot around with Reuniclus multiple times with Regenerator. I can predict him to switch out, for example, and double out and get my health back. So basically Reuniclus just being really nice in this matchup to repeatedly switch into that thing over and over again. Does okay against things like the Mamoswine. Even the Skarmory doesn't do too well against us, because presumably you wouldn't Toxic a Reuniclus because you could think it's Magic Guard. And even afterwards, if he's carrying Toxic, that means he's missing a move, something like Whirlwind or whatever, to stop my Scizor from setting up. Because I can actually, if he doesn't have Whirlwind on Skarmory, I can just keep setting up on it, because what's it realistically going to do to me? Just kind of Brave Bird itself to death. So I think he kind of needs to carry Whirlwind on Scizor, which means I don't think he has Toxic. So things like my Rotom and my Reuniclus should be safe from Toxic from the Skarmory. I can paralyze the Skarmory, I can paralyze a predicted Hydreigon switch in, I can paralyze the Medicham if it stays in. Thunder Wave just really nice in this game. Again, I've got Knockoff on this set. Removing the items can be invaluable against his team, especially removing things from, I guess specifically the Hydreigon and the Skarmory would be the primary switch-ins to my Reuniclus. Removing their item should be really nice for me later in the game. And Recover, in case I'm kind of trying to 1v1 the Medicham, I can just recover off the damage as it keeps hitting me, and I can just kill it with Rocky Helmet Chip. So Reuniclus, really important physically defensive pivot in this game, and I've got a kind of nice physically defensive, not just physically defensive, but a really nice defensive core here between Rotom, Gliscor, and Reuniclus to handle, I think, kind of all the threats that he could bring to the match, at least all the kind of things that I had in my head. And last one up here is Comfey. We're bringing Lilo back once again. No Calm Mind this week. We're just running leftovers with Triage, Draining Kiss, Leech Seed, Taunt, and U-Turn. Taunting the Skarmory, or even taunting the Arachnid could be pretty nice for me to prevent them from setting up hazards, from defogging, from roosting, whatever. Draining Kiss being nice to pressure his Hydreigon. I can basically offensively check that thing, and I can potentially switch in on it if I'm not predicting him to go for like a Z Poison or for a Steel move or something like that, which I know Hydreigon does get for coverage options. But really a decent switch in here to Hydreigon, to the extent that you can have a good switch into Hydreigon. It gets great coverage, but also a great offensive check to it, because Draining Kiss should, it won't OHKO it from full, but it should knock it out after a little bit of prior chip. Leech Seed being really nice to help me kind of 1v1 the Skarmory. I mentioned I already have Taunt on there to taunt the Skarmory and prevent it from roosting. I can whittle it down a little bit with Leech Seed, or whittle down the rest of his team with Leech Seed. And U-Turn for a predicted Rose Raid switch. If he brings in Rose Raid, that's just a free Reuniclus or a free Infernape for me. So if I'm predicting a switch into Rose Raid, clicking U-Turn there can get a little bit of chip on it and force it out with something else like Infernape. So Infernape's really important in this match. I can't let it go down too early, especially if both Skarmory and Rose Raid, for example, are still kicking around. But that was kind of the plan coming into the week, and we'll get right into the battle here. So looking at what Jeff brought, he's got the Tapu Koko, the Mamoswine, Medicham, Hydreigon, Rose Raid, and Skarmory. So pretty much what I expected, except for I don't know what he would replace on the team with this, but I was kind of expecting him to bring Webs this week with the Arachnid. But again, kind of looking at the team I brought, it's really not impacted by Webs too much, with the exception being maybe Infernape. And even then, since I'm Choice Scarf Infernape, I should still outspeed the rest of his team, with the exception being Tapu Koko, even if Webs are up. So I guess it kind of made sense on his end not to bring the Webs. Rotom's a pretty good defogger versus Arachnid there. Obviously, Arachnid doesn't appreciate things like my Mega Tyranitar, which I didn't bring for the first time this week. So I think overall the team we brought makes a lot of sense. I think I prepared for it pretty well in general. Just kind of looking at what team lead here. So I really have no reason not to lead with my Infernape here. It kind of pressures out things like the Mamoswine early on, or the Skarmory, which are potential leads on his end. Can you turn out on pretty much everything, including the Hydreigon or Rose Raid or what have you. I should outspeed his entire team, bar Scarf Tapu Koko, and I can kind of pressure the Medicham out a little bit. I won't OHKO it with Flare Blitz, but I do have my Reuniclus, and I can just kind of U-turn out into that and chip it down that way. So that's what I'm thinking leading off, so I just decided to lead off with the Infernape as he leads with the Mega Medicham. So now, right off the bat here, I make a little bit of a misplay. Looking at this, I'm like, I'm just going to click U-turn. I don't think he'd risk his Skarmory here, but he stays in, actually, with his Medicham, which doesn't make, it's not a bad play, of course, because I shouldn't be able to OHKO this thing. But he does fake out me and does massive damage because Medicham's a boss. Something I just wasn't anticipating was the fake out. I thought he'd try to squeeze some coverage options on there, like Ice Punch, Fire Punch, whatever. And then I'm going to kind of compound the misplay with a U-turn here. I wouldn't say this is necessarily a misplay, clicking U-turn again. But Skarmory having the Rocky Helmet should have been kind of obvious to me. And now my Infernape's at half health at the very beginning of the game, and I've done nothing with it. But at the very least, the U-turn does allow me into Rotom, and I can freely Volt Switch here. It'll do massive damage to Skarmory, or on the predicted Rose Raid switch in here, get me out back into either my Infernape or my Reuniclus. I can also go Gliscor to get my Toxic Orb activated, which is what I do decide to do, because I don't want to risk getting knocked off later in the game. I guess I wouldn't bring it down Mamoswine, but it's always nice to get the Toxic Orb activated nice and early, so I can be a better response to that Tapu Koko. And I'm just going to click Knock Off. I don't anticipate this thing to be carrying HP Ice. I think it'd have HP Fire for my Scizor. So I'm just going to knock off whatever item it's carrying. Turned out to be Assault Vest. So I'm thinking Giga Drain, Sludge Bomb, HP Fire, and then, I don't know, maybe Dazzling Gleam or something like that. Not really sure what he's carrying for his 4 moves here, but I wall this Rose Raid pretty much indefinitely with my Gliscor here. Obviously, if I Roost on the turn, he Giga Drains me. It will be super effective, but after Poison Heal and Roost recovery, I should be out of range of even that super effective hit. And I can kind of stall him out of Giga Drains here, and I've got my Stealth Rocks up now, which is nice to chip down the rest of his team. As he gets in the Skarmory here on what he was presumably predicting to be this Roost. So I'm back up to full my Gliscor, and the Skarmory is in now. It's a little bit chipped, and I know it's Rocky Helmet, so it's not recovering any of that with leftovers, and I'm going to knock off this Rocky Helmet too, because that's really nice for my Scizor in the back. It's really nice for my Infernape to not have to worry about that extra recoil damage every time I go for U-turn or Flare Blitz. and he's just going to defog my rocks. No problem for me. My Gliscor is still at basically full health after the poison heal recovery here. I could reset my stealth rocks if I want to, but I don't really want to do this dance this early in the game with the Skarmory, the whole like walling each other back and forth. So I'm just going to go hard road him here, thinking maybe he's going to try to get his own stealth rocks, but he just whirlwinds me out. So it does reveal the whirlwind as I anticipated, and he gets me into Scizor, which is not great for me, but also not so bad. I can just U-turn out on this thing. He does go for the roost there, and he does reveal that he has a little bit of speed in there, because I think I did creep no speed Skarmory, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's what the speed investment on my Scizor was for. So he does have a little bit of speed in there, it looks like. And I'm just going to be able to U-turn back out into my Rotom. And once again, I can freely Volt Switch here if I choose to. He goes out into Tapu Koko this time to just take the resisted hit. Not too bad for me. Obviously, I could have Hydro Pump, but it's really not worth risking the Roserade getting in for free here, even though my Gliscor does wall it pretty well. I'd rather get the momentum here and get out right into my Gliscor on the Tapu Koko without having to risk the switch in. Here, I've been pivoting around a lot this game and everything like that, and clicking Stealth Rocks, kind of making not ballsier, but like kind of reads that he's going to switch out. But I'm pretty sure this time he's just going to stay in and HP Ice me, because my Gliscor is a huge problem for him. So I'm just going to Earthquake here. I don't think that crit mattered, because he wasn't Shook-a-Berry. So I think that Earthquake should have knocked him out anyways. But getting rid of Tapu Koko early game is really nice for me. It looked like, I think that might be Specs damage on the HP Ice, or maybe at least Expert Belt from the HP Ice damage there. But I'm still at half health with my Gliscor. I can roost up on the Skarmory later. I can roost up on Roserade. Obviously, I do invite in the Mamoswine here, which is a problem, but Rotom Wash, like I mentioned, is a pretty good switch into this thing. He does make the correct prediction and goes for a knockoff to get rid of my leftovers, which is kind of unfortunate for me because I don't have Pain Split on this set, so that's going to really hinder Rotom's longevity for the rest of the match. But I'm just going to Volt Switch once again here, not predicting him to stay in with the Mamoswine and risk like a burn or a Hydro Pump here. I make kind of the ballsy play and Volt Switch out on a ground type. Not really that ballsy of a play. I think that was kind of the right read to make in that scenario. But I can get right back out into my Gliscor here and continue to wall this Roserade, get my Stealth Rocks back up potentially, or what have you. Obviously, I'm at a pretty good amount of HP where he's not going to 2-hit KO me with Giga Drain from this range. Or at least I don't believe he 2-hit KOs me with Giga Drain from this range. It could be a roll, actually, looking at the damage that he did there. But I got my Stealth Rocks back up now. It's going to force him to defog again later with Skarmory, which is yet another free Rotom for me if I want it. Or a potential free Infernape if I'm going to feel like risking that. In this case, I'm just going to Roost again. Like I mentioned, after the Roost recovery, I'm going to be out of range of that Giga Drain, even though it would be super effective. So unless he crits me, which would have been kind of bad for me there, actually, I should be at a good amount of health, and I'm back up to full with Gliscor again. Obviously, the Medicham came in, but like I mentioned, I have a great switch in for this in Reuniclus. So Reuniclus is just going to wall this Medicham. He goes for the Fake Out, sees my Rocky Helmet. He should not want to stay in here. He should want to go into something like Hydreigon or the Skarmory. So I'm just going to throw off a Thunder Wave here. Since I've already knocked off the Skarmory's item, I felt like Thunder Wave was the more valuable play because I can get some free turns on the Skarmory later in the game. And if he went Hydreigon, I would have had that thing paralyzed as well, which would mean my Scizor would outspeed it and it could KO with U-turn. So I felt like Thunder Wave was a good play there. Predicting him to just defog again, I get back out into my Rotom Wash. And we're going to kind of continue to do this dancing around game here. I'm going to Volt Switch again here because I really have no reason not to. He brings out the Mamoswine to block the Volt Switch. It's a good play on his end, getting in his ground type. I really don't think he's going to stay in here, but I really kind of want him to risk it, and he does. Just go for the knockoff, get a little bit more chip off on my Rotom, and I'm just going to click Hydro Pump here. I still have my Gliscor to wall the Roserade anyways, so I kind of scouted that out as yet another kind of aggressive play on Jeff's end to stay in with the Mamoswine, and I kind of punished him for it there. Whacking that Mamoswine with a Hydro Pump. I'm just going to throw off a Toxic here because it would KO Mamoswine anyways, but he does switch out into the Roserade. Oh well, it was more accurate than Hydro Pump, basically, was the reason I went for Toxic there. I've still got the Gliscor to switch into this Roserade, which, once again, I'm anticipating to not have HP Ice. But Jeff makes a really good double and goes back out into Mamoswine. Yeah, I could have stayed in there, but it really wasn't worth risking Rotom at that point in the match when it comes in so freely on Skarmory to defog or Volt Switch or what have you. And predicting him to just go for an Ice move here, I'm going to go out into my Scizor and take the Icicle Crash. So no problem there taking the Icicle Crash from Scizor. I can freely Bullet Punch here just to knock out this Mamoswine. Just Skarmory is really not at a range where I want to SD yet at this point in the game. And U-turn, while it would have been a pretty good play there to get back in my Infernape, I didn't really feel was necessary. I just wanted to make the safe play there and not take unnecessary decide on my Scizor in case he decided to stay in and Earthquake me or Ground Z me, or I guess he doesn't have Ground Z. But there's really no reason to risk anything there. I just wanted to go for the safe Bullet Punch and potentially knock out the Mamoswine. But he's able to get in his Skarmory and gets kind of a big para here because now he's not able to roost. And his Skarmory is looking awfully low there. I'm going to double out into my Infernape here because his likely switch in is either the Mamoswine or the Roserade. And I do get the Roserade here, and now this is a free Flare Blitz for me. I could U-turn, predicting again him to switch out, but he really has no good switch-ins for Flare Blitz. Like, even Hydreigon's going to take a lot of damage from it. And I've got a pretty good response to that in my Comfey. So Flare Blitz is going to knock out the Roserade, which is amazing for my Rotom Wash. I don't really have to play the game with Hydro Pumps anymore, worrying about the Roserade coming in. Obviously my Infernape's quite low now, but there's still no reason to risk the Fake Out on the Medicham here. I'm going to go right back out into my Reuniclus as Jeff makes another really good double and gets in his Hydreigon. Obviously Hydreigon going to be able to whack me with a dark move here, so I'm just going to go out into my Gliscor. It's not too useful at this point in the match. Like I mentioned, there's the whole indefinitely walling each other with the Skarmory thing, but he turns out to be physical Hydreigon, so I'm anticipating that he was carrying something like Earthquake, Crunch, Superpower for my Tyranitar, and then some fourth move. I'm not sure what kind of physical options Hydreigon has, but that actually is kind of another thing now that's walled by my Gliscor. So Gliscor is just going to sit in here, be able to click knockoff on the Hydreigon, but he switches out into the Medicham. Pretty good play on his end to get the Medicham back in, but he still can't really break through my Reuniclus with the Medicham, so I really have no reason not to go back into Reuniclus here. Even if he doubles back into Hydreigon again, I still have my Gliscor at a lot of health, so it doesn't matter too much. So he's going to Ice Punch me, take a little bit more Rocky Helmet Chip. I can just throw off another Thunder Wave pretty freely here. What I'm predicting to be the Hydreigon switch in. Could have gone Skarmory there to try and roost on me, but even then, Skarmory is so passive against my team, it wouldn't have mattered too much. Thunder Wave on the Hydreigon is pretty nice because now I outspeed with my Scizor, like I mentioned. And at this point, I'm just going to scout for him potentially making a double out, but he does show U-turn. That was the last move that I was thinking of with the Hydreigon. He does show U-turn on my Rotom Wash, which is unfortunate for me because now I'm in range of an Ice Shard from Mamoswine. But I'm just going to sack off Rotom. I've really got no reason to keep it around at that low of health. And he shows that he's Scarf Mamoswine, actually, which means this is good setup fodder for my Scizor. Obviously, Skarmory with no item is not in range of a +2 knockoff, but if he gets fully paralyzed after I go +2 here and I get to kill him with 2 knockoffs, I win the game, like from that point with the Scizor. So I'm willing to kind of risk that here. There's really no drawback on my end to just SD up on this Scarf Superpower Mamoswine and just click the knockoff and see if he gets paralyzed, because even if he does Whirlwind me out, it's going to be at an extremely low amount of health going forward, and that's in fact what he decides to do, is just to Whirlwind me out. Unfortunately, it brings in my Reuniclus, which cannot touch this Skarmory at this point, so he's going to get off a free Roost here as I have to go back out into my something else to check it. Could go Gliscor, wall each other indefinitely, go back out into Scizor. It's kind of a repeat, not great for me. Infernape would have been a good play there, I guess, to get another Flare Blitz off, but I want to save that nuke in the back because I am in Blaze range. So I'm just going to go out in my Comfey and taunt the Skarmory to keep it at least low enough that I can do something with my Scizor later in the game. It looks like he predicts the taunt there with the Iron Head, or potential actually Calm Mind would have been problematic for him there as well. So he goes for the Iron Head, able to 2-hit KO me with that, of course, so I'm just going to have to U-turn out here on the Skarm, but he goes into the Mamoswine, so I U-turn out, kill the Mamoswine, which is great for my Gliscor. Gliscor can pretty much wall the Skarmory and the Hydreigon. I am anticipating I do know actually already at this point in the match that the Medicham has Ice Punch, but I'm just going to go out into Chimpact here. The Infernape basically forces him to go into his Medicham and click Fake Out, which I can get more Rocky Helmet Chip off on the Reuniclus with. So I'm just going to swap out into my Reuniclus here as Jeff makes another good double here and goes out into Hydreigon. But again, the doubles, even though Jeff's making the right plays in terms of doubling around my Reuniclus, I have the combination of Reuniclus and Gliscor to indefinitely wall the entirety of his team. So in theory, I could actually PP stall him just by infinitely switching between the two of them depending on what's in versus me. But really at this point in the match, I'm actually going to speed it up here. This is the first time I've actually had to speed up a video because it kind of got a lot stallier than I was anticipating this game was going to get. But I'm basically just kind of switching between Reuniclus and Gliscor here. Reuniclus with the Regenerator, Gliscor with a Toxic Orb, able to roost off damage. Like, there's really nothing he can do about it at this point in the match. His only offensive presence left is Medicham, and Medicham, like I mentioned, cannot break my Reuniclus, and this Hydreigon clearly cannot break my Gliscor. So just between the two of those, I'm going to win the game from this point. So I really don't see any need to show you guys the entirety of how that goes down. Try to make some kind of fancy switches here, going into Comfey and things like that, predicting him to roost and hitting the Leech Seed, or you turning around, whatever. Like, the game got really stally here towards the end, unfortunately. But, you know, that's just kind of the way it went. Like I mentioned, I didn't bring as much offensive pressure to this game as I thought I would, so that kind of dragged out the end of this match. But I felt like the defensive synergy was kind of perfect in this game between Gliscor, Rotom, and Reuniclus. Of course, Rotom being the only thing that ends up going down here. Spoilers. Rotom being the only thing that ends up going down here. But as I get the Leech Seed here on the Skarmory at the end, I taunt him so he can't roost. And that's game at this point, because I can just freely go into U-turn out into my Reuniclus here, and he has to Iron Head if he stays in, which means he's going to take Rocky Helmet Chip plus Leech Seed. Now he can't come in on my Scizor. The game's over. At that point, Bullet Punch would clean him up once the Skarmory went down. So Jeff just clicks forfeit. I don't blame him. Like, there was no reason for us to play that out. The way the league works is that Reuniclus is actually going to get the credit for those last 3 kills, which are actually Reuniclus' first 3 kills of the season, unfortunately. But good game to Jeff. You made the right doubles. Like, you played pretty well, I think. I think just kind of team matchup wise, it was in my favor here, unfortunately. So that kind of resulted in me having this kind of good defensive core to pivot around. Once the Tapu Koko and Roserade were gone specifically, like, there was really not much to pressure me offensively between what was left of Mamoswine, the physical Hydreigon, and the Medicham. Obviously, since you can't run whatever Z move you want in this league, you have to use the Z Crystal you have. Hydreigon is kind of limited in this matchup. Like, it has some pretty serious 4 move slot syndrome, I think, because you do want Superpower to hit my Tyranitar, which like I mentioned, didn't end up bringing because I didn't think it had a very good matchup, especially with things like the Medicham running around, Skarmory. I didn't want to be giving him a bunch of free turns, especially with Medicham to click moves, because you don't want to risk crits and stuff with your Reuniclus and having to double out and sack stuff. It's just not really a good look. But overall, I think I played this game pretty well. I made a lot of safe plays for the most part, just because I didn't really have to predict too much. Like I mentioned, this is a much more defensive team, which kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Enables is the word I'm looking for. Kind of enables a more defensive, kind of safe play style with the team I brought. So I didn't really have to predict too much because I had great switch-ins for everything on his team. Even the Roserade, which was a good bring on his part. Roserade actually does really well against my team. Was kind of locked into a weird situation where it had to run HP Fire to hit my Scizor, or it had to run HP Ice to hit my Gliscor, and if it could hit one, it couldn't hit the other. So maybe in the long run, HP Ice would have been better to hit the Gliscor, but then you don't have HP Fire, so you're walled, and you're perfect setup fodder for my Scizor if the Skarmory goes down. Like, it was a really just tough matchup on Jeff's end, I think, to prep for. I think he prepped like reasonably well for this game, and he played very well. But there just wasn't really anything to do to break through the core at the end of the game there. So that's about it for me. 5-0 here in my favor guarantees us playoffs at this point, and I'm currently 9 differential ahead of the second place team, which also has a loss, which means basically if I win one of my last, or not basically, it means if I win one of my last 2 games here at the end of the season, I am guaranteed the #1 overall seed in the league, which gives me a first round bye, and also guarantees that I play the essentially lowest team remaining. So there's 6 teams that make the playoffs. I believe Jeff will be one of them. He's 4-2, so I can't imagine him dropping out of playoffs. He's a very good player, got a very scary team. So I definitely think Jeff will pull through and make playoffs here towards the end. But with the 6-team playoffs, we get 2 teams with a bye in the first round, and then the first seed plays the lowest remaining, and the second seed plays the highest remaining. So like if the 3 and the 4 seeds win their matches, then I would play the 4 seed if I'm the #1 overall. So that's kind of the plan, is to get kind of the most favorable matchups looking forward through the playoffs. So definitely still going to try to win next week against, I believe we're playing Lord Z and the Philadelphia Phantoms, who beat Jeff earlier in the season. They're currently 3-3, I believe, so they're sitting in a decent playoff position as well. With the way the league's shaking out, you can check the doc in the description to see where everybody's at in terms of playoff ranking. but this is a potential playoff matchup. If I win against Lord Z, it's going to be tough to make playoffs with 4 losses, I think, but not impossible. So there's some potential that could be a rematch in playoffs. So that means I might not want to go all out in prep entirely, but I do want to win next week and just lock up that #1 overall seed so I can maybe meme it out next in the 8th week of the season, the 8th and final week of the season. But thank you guys very much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. I know I kind of rambled a bit here at the end, but I'll see you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. Bye-bye.